Good evening, everyone. We'll call this Committee of Adjustment hearing to order. Just before we get started this evening, just going to go through the hearing protocols tonight. We have two applications on our agenda this evening. A couple of housekeeping items. For anyone that's in-house, if you can please turn off your cell phones or place them on silent mode, that would be great. And anyone asking or presenting questions, if you can address them through the chair, not directly to the person being asked. The first order of business will be to ask any committee members if they have any conflicts of interest with any of the applications this evening, followed by any requests of deferrals or withdrawals of applications. If an applicant is coming in online and is not here present, I will ask them when they first come into the meeting. The committee secretary-treasurer will then read out each application noted on the agenda with a brief description and staff recommendation. The applicant or the agent for the applicant will be asked to come forward. They can go to the podium on our right, introduce themselves, and be allotted a short additional comments if they wish with regards to their application. Members of the committee will then have the opportunity to ask the applicant any questions that they might have, followed by members of the public who wish to speak to the application. Any members of the public wishing to speak to an application will be asked to come forward, or if they're online, we'll bring them into the meeting, state their name and address for the record, limit their comments to 10 minutes, and must present all questions and comments that are pertinent to the application in that time frame. Persons making a presentation will not necessarily be allowed to return again to speak to the same application. Following all comments, the applicant will be afforded some closing comments if they desire. The committee will then present a decision in the form of a motion. The motion will be discussed and voted upon. If a vote is tied, the motion will be defeated and a new motion will be made. When motions are defeated, new motions will be made until a decision has been reached. Notices of decision will only be provided to those persons that leave their name and addresses in writing with the Secretary-Treasurer. For those that are in-house, there's a sign-in sheet at the back of the room for that purpose. For anyone that's online watching or viewing online, they can email Taya how do you pronounce your last name? Taraba, sorry. At taya.taraba@portcolborne.ca, or you can call 905-835-2900 extension 204 immediately following the hearing and leave a message. It should also be noted that in order to be advised of any possible Ontario Land Tribunal hearings, persons must request and be sent a copy of the committee's decision on an application. So that's the protocol for this evening. I will ask if there's any conflicts of interest of any committee members this evening. Not seeing any. And I don't know if we have any requests for deferrals at this point in time. Not seeing any. So with that, we will go to the first application on the agenda, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the agenda tonight, we have one minor variance application and one consent application. Notice of the applications were circulated to the public on January 29th. The required agencies received notice of the applications on January 16th. A recommendation report for each application was prepared by planning staff and made publicly available on February 9th. All correspondence received by February 9th were addressed in the recommendation reports. Those interested can view the recommendation reports online on the city's website or in person at City Hall. Those interested may also contact planning staff in person, by email, or over the phone to obtain a copy of the reports. Accommodations for alternative methods of viewing or obtaining the recommendation reports are available upon request. Please note, the zoning bylaw currently in effect in the City of Port Colborne zoning bylaw 6575-3018 as amended, which will henceforth be referred to as the zoning bylaw. Our first application tonight is minor variance application A2623PC for the lands municipally known as 3637 Fire Lane 12 in the Lakeshore Residential Zone as established by the zoning bylaw. The agent, Craig Esposti, on behalf of the owner, Diane Leon, is requesting relief from the provisions of the zoning bylaw to permit a reduced interior side yard setback, increased lot coverage, and increased maximum height of an accessory structure, notwithstanding the following. That the minimum interior side yard setback of 2.05 meters be permitted, whereas 3 meters is required. That the maximum lot coverage of 16.16% be permitted, whereas 15 is required, and the maximum accessory structure height of 7 meters be permitted, whereas 6 meters is required. Given the information in the recommendation report, Planning staff recommends application A2623PC be granted as the application is minor in nature, it is appropriate for the development of the site, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent of the purpose of the zoning bylaw, and is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan, subject to the additional conditions outlined in the February 9th, 2024 planning report. That concludes the correspondence for this application.
Thank you. And is the applicant here this evening, or are they online?
Should be in the room now.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Perfect.
Since you're coming in electronically, you don't wish to defer or withdraw your application this evening?
No, we're actually back tonight. Sorry, Mr. Chair, we're back tonight after previously deferring on January the 17th. So we'd like to proceed with the application.
Very good. Is there anything further you'd like to add at this time?
I don't think there's a whole lot to add. The introduction was quite clear. The only thing I would say is, like I said, we're back after the deferral. We've worked with Niagara Region and the NPCA to address staff comments. We've seen the revised staff report, see that they have no objections and recommend approval. Obviously we have no issue with the report as provided. So I'll leave it to that and say if there's any questions of the committee, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you. Eric?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the applicant. The recommendation report proposes 3 conditions that are from the region. Have you had an opportunity to review those?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we have. We have no concerns with the conditions from the region. The first one actually for the submission of the archaeologist report is already in process, so we're expecting no issues with that. So we'll probably have that shortly. And the other conditions for tree protection plan and erosion sediment control are fine, and the septic permit as well. We have no concerns with any of those.
Okay. Okay. I guess I have a little bit of a concern with the condition 2, which is the applicant implements best management practices during construction, including but not limited to a tree protection plan and erosion and sediment control plan. It's saying the practice, it's not a very clear condition in the sense that it's saying those 2 items, but it's not limited to those 2 items. So I guess maybe to staff in this particular one, how would this condition get cleared?
Through the chair to Member Beauregard, if it pleases the committee, you could reword it. I just took what was recommended by the region and put it in here. Reword it to say that it's required prior to the submission of a building permit.
Also, this particular condition, would this not be dealt with through the NPCA works permit of maybe not so much the tree protection plan, but an erosion and sediment control plan? Would that not be?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not overly familiar with their work permit process, so I can't speak towards it. I am under the impression that the erosion and sediment control plan is yes, but I can't confirm if the tree protection plan is.
I would think to maybe potentially remove this condition because the Niagara Works permit deals with a lot of it, and this is more of an NPCA area than a regional area. But if the applicant is fine with these conditions, then I'm fine with leaving them in.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, I guess the only thing I would say is we have no concerns with providing the 2 plans. Let's say the tree protection plan and the erosion sediment control plan. Whether it's cleared by the region or NPCA, I expect that's a condition of approval or prior to building permit. So when I say I don't have any concerns with leaving them in, we will need to determine how that gets cleared, but providing the plans for review is not that in itself is not a concern.
Very good.
If that helps.
Does anyone else have any questions? I guess to the same point on that same condition, just seems odd to have a condition that really only applies during the construction phase. I don't know how, like, once the construction phase is done, like, it just seems weird to have that condition in there. It sounds like it needs to be a condition of the building permit, so they have to do this to get the building permit, either from the city or MPCA or the region or whoever. I don't know why it's a condition of the variance. If it's a requirement of these other requirements to build, it should be just left at that. Because in my point is, when I'm looking at this, what happens if halfway through it says the applicant implements best management practice, decides to, I don't know, halfway through deviate from that? Does now the variance just go away? I don't know how you, once you start down that path and they've been given the permission to proceed, you know, it'd almost be like putting in, okay, well, the applicant needs to get a building permit. Otherwise, this variance isn't, like, it's kind of, I don't know, it just seems odd that that would be in there. I realize it's a requirement. I don't know why it's a condition of the variance per se, but especially since it's a requirement elsewhere, it just seems like redundant to put it in a second time. I don't know if, Chris, you have any comment on that or not, but.
To you, Mr. Chair, I mean, it is ultimately the committee's decision. This is a regional condition. It's what they've requested to add on there, so I've included it in there purely as a comment to them. I would for any comment that is received from any agency. So it's up to the committee to determine what they want to do with the attached condition.
Okay. Eric?
Well, through you, I also have just in regards to that condition number 3 even as well, like, you're going to have to get a permit anyways, so why is it a condition that it be in here? Like, the development can't happen without that sewage system being replaced, so it just seems redundant. I understand that there's why they're saying this, but it's not something I think that should really be conditionalized. And in my experience, when it comes to clearing conditions that come from the region, you have to go to the region directly. So in this case, it'd be Katie Young, and you would be having to get them to sign off on that you've done everything that you need to do to clear that condition. And it can be, I don't know, I'll leave it at that. So I would be fine with taking those out, but definitely condition number 1 should remain, in my opinion.
Yeah, and to the applicant, I guess for number 1, I know you've already done the archaeological assessment, so is it just a matter of waiting for that letter from the ministry to say that you're good to go? Is that all that you're basically waiting on?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that's exactly right. It's been submitted with the ministry and it's just waiting for final approval.
Gotcha. And I guess, Eric, to that last one, that one's very simple. If you get the permit for your septic system, you've cleared the condition, right? You have it, so anyway. Okay, I'll leave it at that. Has anyone else got any other questions? Is there members of the public that wish to speak to this application this evening? I don't see anyone there. Did we have someone online? Okay, so we'll bring the person in online. We're just waiting for Kevin to come into the meeting electronically. Oh, I see he's raised his hand.
Yeah, there he is. He's in there.
Kevin, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
There we go. We can now. Just before we get started, if you could just state your name and address for the record, and you have 10 minutes, and please keep your comments directly with respect to the application this evening.
Yes, sir. First of all, thank you very much for your consideration and giving me time to express some of my concerns. My name is Kevin Carney. I live at 3625 Fire Lane 12, immediately to the west of the subject property. In looking at the documents that I was sent for the upcoming work, I was concerned that it talks about a variance change from the setback of being 3 meters to a little over 2 meters, but it begins with a construction of a retaining wall right on my property line. And I submitted an air photo that I think would make it easier to see. There's a 15-foot tall sand dune, essentially, that's remnant to the original before any development in this area. That's right on the property line, and that would cutting into that bank would undermine the roots and the trees. I don't know how you build a. First of all, I don't. From my perspective, there isn't a 3-foot setback or 3-meter setback, and I don't know how you cut the bank without having it all collapse and undermining the trees that give me some privacy from my neighbor next door. You able to hear me?
We can.
Okay. The other thing is the retaining wall goes right down against the right of way. There's a 15-foot right of way, which is my only access and the access from my neighbor at 3611 to my property. And I'm concerned that right now, when somebody's parked in the right of way, I can usually squeak by, but this is trying to put I think the largest structure that's possible on the property, and it's pushing right up against the right of way with a retaining wall. It doesn't necessarily, so long as there's nothing in the right of way, impede me getting through, but I'm concerned about fire trucks or delivery trucks in the future. I don't see any setback on the right of way. It seems a little setback. You can't even build a retaining wall there without actually sitting out in the right of way and either bricking it up or whatever. I'm not sure that planning. So the retaining wall is of concern to me, and the blockage of the right of way. I don't know what remedy I have. I did submit a picture from last summer, just when they were doing minor work. And I got up to run up to the No Frills and Food Basics one morning, and there's a load of gravel and a big truck in the way. I'm not sure what remedy I have to be able to get in and out and not be denied access to my property during the construction, or the demolition and the construction.
If I might, to your last point there, with regards to the right of way, that one is not, I guess, part of our purview to say one way or the other. That's more of a civil matter between the neighboring properties and who has access to that right of way. And as far as I know, setbacks are not. There's no requirement for setbacks from rights of way. I see our planner shaking his head no. So as far as I know, it's only really to the property boundaries. So with that, is there anything further you'd like to add before we try to address some of these other questions? Or
well, the other thing that surprised me was the construction of the second structure on the north side of the property, the other side of the right of way. When Shirk and Benner developed this land and subdivided it back in 1945, the first deed on lot 40 was conveyed to Dean Babbage and his wife, who were neighbors for many years. That deed and all the other deeds, including my deed, even the lot on 3611, which is much bigger, is restricted to one dwelling on each piece of property. That was a deed restriction. It's been a number of years since I went up to the courthouse in Welland and looked at those deeds, but they did put a deed restriction, so I was surprised at the second story over the garage of putting a second dwelling on the property because there was a deed restriction.
yeah, with regards to that, can't really comment. That if it was a requirement of today, then it should have been caught in the staff report and addressed accordingly. As far as I know, the only variances from the current bylaws and requirements are addressed this evening with the application. If there's something on title that restricts something, that wouldn't be under the city's purview. As far as I know, that would be more of a civil matter, I guess, between neighboring parties if there's limitations. But So we're really just talking about those 2 or 3 variances that they're asking for this evening. So with that, I know the agent for the applicant's still on the line. With regards to the retaining wall, maybe you can add a little bit of insight onto the retaining wall for the neighbor to maybe address some of his concerns, if that's possible.
Sure, absolutely. Through you, Mr. Chair. I think there's a couple of things. First thing, just to clarify the variance as well, the request for a side yard setback of 2.05 is really for the easterly setback where there's a chimney projection. And that's applied, I understand, through planning, it's applied to all of the setbacks, the side yard setbacks. But that side, your side yard setback, or the setback on your side, is actually 2.58 to 2.6 meters along that side. So it's a little further back, which may give you a little bit more comfort. It's closer to the 3 meters. The retaining walls themselves are, that's more of a, I'm gonna say it's a landscape feature at this point. Really just working to bridge the grades between properties, I'll say. It is, there are a series of steps up proposed, and currently there are as well with an existing accessory building that's being removed. So some of this is to rework those access stairs up the side yard towards the lake. We will have to look at it more closely if there's trees or tree roots that are impacted or a dune. I know that'll be a concern probably through the tree protection plan, which we talked about earlier, which will be looked at, and probably also I would imagine through NPCA review. They're going to obviously have concerns with impact to the dune and any of the hazards. So I'm going to say I may not have an answer for exactly how that gets addressed, but I'm going to say it's really a landscape feature that will be addressed through that process. And I appreciate the concern, and I'll say I don't know that that's necessarily tied to the variance request, but it's something that we'll give attention to through those reviews and approvals. As far as the garage, whether there was a deed restriction for the second story for another dwelling unit, that I don't know. We'd have to look into that. At this point, we're just showing it as a storage area on the second floor. I know there are provisions to allow for accessory dwelling units, but at this point, that's not what we're applying for. But if they wanted to do it in the future, that's something we'd obviously have to look into and address.
Okay. I had always thought that something that was a deed restriction couldn't be changed. Am I wrong?
From that perspective, I can't really comment one way or another. That sounds more like a civil matter than a city bylaw matter. The only thing that we can address here this evening is any variances from the existing bylaws that are tagged to that zoning. So with that, is there any other questions that you'd like to finish off with or comments?
Well, my biggest concern, of course, is the access to my property through the right of way, and I'm kind of lost as to exactly what I do if we're up there June, July, and August every year. We've been up there for 65 years. I don't know how I get through, and I don't know if you come up. Contractors don't really care. They don't. They're there to, well, like the guy that dumped the load of gravel. He wasn't really concerned with scrap. But I don't know what my options are.
Yeah, unfortunately, from our standpoint, that's not really something that the Committee of Adjustment can remedy. I would hope that as they're building, that they're courteous and let you know when the road or access is going to be disrupted, and or provide an alternate access for you to get through and around. I would hope that you two can work that out and go from there.
So I'm stuck.
From this committee standpoint, there's nothing that we can do. I won't advise you legally what your actions are. That you'd have to look into that yourself. But from our perspective, there's nothing that we can do in this particular case from our standpoint.
Well, I wanted to bring it up while we're in the planning stage, because later on, it may not have be a point. The setback on the garage on the side looks to be very small, right up against the property line almost. That doesn't have to be 3 meters also, like the house?
Maybe I can defer that to Chris. I believe for accessory dwellings, the setback's a little bit smaller, but I can let him confirm that.
Through the chair to the speaker, that's correct. I would echo the sentiments of the chair. It's the requirements for setbacks are different for accessory structures as opposed to primary structures like a dwelling. And in this case, the requirement is only 1 meter, which has been provided.
All right. Well, I have you on the line, Chris. Could you give me some idea of when this is all going to take place?
Through the chair, if I'm understanding the question correctly, just because it's a little hard to hear, you're asking if I can make you aware of when they apply for their permits?
Yes. And when construction, well, when demolition and construction would start?
Through the chair to the speaker, I'm not able to provide notification for when they obtain a permit. However, when building permits are obtained, they're required to post them on the property, so you would be aware of it just through them having to post it. But I can't notify when a permit has been sought. And to expand on that, when someone applies for a permit and receives a permit, they may not necessarily start the work immediately. Sometimes people get their permits in the winter and wait until the summer months to start the work. So it's really a guessing game from when they obtain the permit to when they start doing the work.
Okay. So I just have to wait and see.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, I appreciate your time, and I understand that the planning commission doesn't have to worry about some of the things I'm concerned about, but it was my only opportunity to really kind of say something before everything starts. So I do appreciate your time, and I appreciate your consideration.
Absolutely. Thank you. Is there anyone else? All right. So that's it. Does anyone else have any final questions? Does the applicant have any final questions or comments that they want to provide?
No, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, if there's no other questions or comments, does anyone have a recommendation? Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to application A2623 PC, located at lot 40 on plan 811, municipally known as 3637 Fire Lane 12. The minor variance application A2623 PC be granted for the following reasons. 1, the application is minor in nature. 2, it is appropriate for the development of the site. 3, it is desirable in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. 4, it is desirable in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan, subject to the following conditions. 1, that the applicant owner receive acceptance from the Ministry of Citizenship and Multiculturalism for the archaeological assessment report titled Stage 1 and 2 Archaeological Assessment, prepared by Archaeological Consultants Canada, dated November 8th, 2023. If the ministry requires further archaeological work to be completed prior to the acknowledging this report, these reports must also be submitted to and acknowledged by the ministry to the satisfaction of Niagara Region prior to clearance of this condition. No demolition, grading, or other soil disturbances shall take place on the subject property prior to the issuance of a letter from the MCM through Niagara Region, confirming that all archaeological resource concerns have been met, licensing and resource conservation requirements. 2, that the applicant implements best management practices during construction, including but not limited to a tree protection plan and an erosion and sediment control plan. 3, that the applicant applies and receives approval for a new Class 4 sewage system meeting Ontario Building Code requirements.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder to that? Sorry. Dave? Any other questions or comments on the motion on the floor? All those in favor? Those opposed? You note the one opposed. That'll be carried. Thank you. There is a 20-day waiting period for that, but once that's cleared, you should be good to go, and as long as you clear your conditions before proceeding. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
And Madam Secretary, the next application at your leisure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will now introduce consent application B0124PC. The subject lands are municipally known as 105 Merritt Parkway, located in the first density residential R1 zone. In the application, the applicant, Pamela Kujis, is requesting the committee's consent to sever for the purpose of creating a new lot. The subject parcels are shown as parts 1 and 2 on the proposed sketch, where part 1 is to be severed for a new residential use and part 2 is to be retained for an existing residential use. Given the recommendation report, planning staff recommend that the respective consent application be granted, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report dated February 9th, 2024. That concludes the correspondence for this application.
Thank you. Is the applicant here this evening? They're not here at all? Not online? Nothing? Interesting. Okay. Guess we can't ask them any questions then. So with that being said, is there any members of the public that wish to speak to this application? No? And there's no one online for this one? Is there any questions or comments from the committee members? Dave?
Just one. Thank you, Chair. The number 3 on the conditions. The applicant signs the City of Port Colborne Standard Memorandum of Understanding explaining development charge of cash in lieu, dedication to parkland purposes based on an appraisal at the expense of the applicant, wherein the value of the land is to be determined as the day before issuance of a building permit. If the applicant sells the property, it then becomes the property owner who buys the land to pay all those fees, correct?
Through the chair to Member Elliott, that is correct. As of right now, the parkland dedication fees are collected at the time of the building permit, not at the time of severance. The MOU is a requirement under the official plan right now, which is why it's included. There's been a long back and forth about changing our parkland dedication requirements, but as of right now, those are the requirements in the OP.
Just so that the applicant for the consent understands that this is going to take place if and when they sell. So that's what the acknowledgement, I can't speak today, is for then, just so that they know that they can relay that to any prospective purchaser of the land?
Correct, through the chair. It's worded in the memorandum that we have stated that if and when they sell the property, they are required to inform the purchaser that they are required to pay cash in lieu when they go to build.
Okay, perfect. I'm good. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Just in the staff report about the site triangle, it was noted that it's condition 4, that the 3.5 by 3.5 meter sightline triangle on it says southwest, I believe it's supposed to be southeast corner. It's at the corner of Corvette and Merritt Parkway, correct?
I just want to double check. To you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. It would be the southeast corner. Yeah.
Very good. So with that, has anyone else got any other questions? If not, does anyone have a recommendation? Well, no one wants to read all that? No? Angie's volunteering. There you go.
Thank you. Okay. With respect to application B0124PC, the land's legally known as Plan 53, Part Lot 4, New Plan 812 in the City of Port Colborne, municipally known as 105 Merritt Parkway. That the consent application B0124-PC be granted, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report dated February 9th, 2024. 1, that the applicant provides the Secretary Treasurer with the deeds in triplicate of the conveyance of the subject parcel or a registrable legal document, legal description of the subject parcel, together with a paper copy and electronic copy of the deposited reference plan, if applicable, for use in the issuance of the certificate of consent. Tongue-tied here. 2, that a final application or final certification fee of $240 payable to the City of Port Colborne is submitted to the Secretary Treasurer. 3, that the applicant signs the City of Port Colborne Standard Memorandum of Understanding explaining that the development charges and cash in lieu of the dedication of land for park purposes based on an appraisal at the expense of the applicant, wherein the value of the land is to be determined as of the day before the issuance of the building permit, is required prior to the issuance of a building permit pursuant to Section 42 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, as amended. 4, the 3.5 meter by 3.5 meter sightline triangle on the southeast corner, correct? Of Part 2 be conveyed to the City of Port Colborne. 5, that the applicant receives approval for an 8 meter easement on the north side of Part 1 that grants the City of Port Colborne access to conduct maintenance work on the municipal drain to the north of the property to the satisfaction of city staff. 6, that all the conditions of the consent be completed by February 14th, 2026. For the following reasons. 1, the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the regional official plan, the City of Port Colborne official plan, and will also comply with the provisions of the zoning bylaw 6575-30-18 as amended.
Thank you. A seconder to that? Dave? Any questions or comments? All those in favor? That'll be carried unanimously. Thank you. Is there any other business by anyone? Not seeing any. Everyone got their OACA memberships all straightened away? Okay. Very good. Can I look for a mover and a seconder of the January minutes? Gary, Angie, any questions or comments? All those in favor, they'll be carried. And with that, I will adjourn this Committee of Adjustment hearing.